Hello, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad, and welcome to my world. Thank you for joining me here. Some of you are joining me because you've watched the videos before. Some of you are joining me because of the usually contentious and clickbaity title I have given this one, which is, I believe it'll be something along the lines of, has World War III already begun? So just for anyone who's, just so you know off that top, I'm not going to be giving any tips on how to survive the post-apocalypse. If you're looking for tips on say how to put canned goods in your fallout shelter or whatever, that is not what I'm going to be exploring. That is not this kind of video. Instead, I'm looking at a question of, if you go 100 years into the future, will historians look back at 2025, where we are now, and consider World War III to have begun already? And actually that we were just naive in thinking that we were somehow not a world at war. And basically we're all just sat here in the middle of a world war and we just don't realize it's begun. This is a theory that's been advanced by actually lots of people. I've read it in more and more places. And I just thought it was a really interesting thing to talk about and explore and figure out. And I'd love to have your comments down below on what you think about whether World War III has begun or not, at least as it will be seen in 100 years' time by historians. So, if we take it on the idea that World War III has begun, and we are in the midst of it, when did it begin? So when will the historians term it to have begun? I mean, the most tempting starting point that I can think of is February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And despite what any conspiracy theorists will say, pretty much out of the blue. In fact, most of the conspiracy theorists who are talking about how Russia had to do it and it was always on the way, etc., were precisely the people who, right up until about 5 minutes before the tanks rolled across the Ukrainian border, were saying it will never happen, and it's ridiculous actually to assert that it will ever happen. Russia will never invade Ukraine. So, the interesting thing about February 2022 as the date is, to Ukrainians, they won't even look at that as the start of their war with the Russians, as it exists now. To most Ukrainians, they consider themselves to have been in a state of war with Russia since the Russians took over Crimea in 2014. Did it begin in 2014? I don't think so. But actually, that sort of gets to the heart of why this is tricky to talk about. I think one of the things that maybe historians will look back at this era in a century's time is there'll probably be a lot more discussion around cyber warfare. In a way, actually, we're not really talking about it as yet. And even just me broaching the topic, I feel a bit odd because it sort of suddenly feels like, what am I getting into that's conspiracy theory laden and what's actually based on scientific fact? It's tricky because actually I think there's a lot of questions about what we know, what we don't know. I think objectively we can say Russia and China have been waging some form of information war against the West for a long time. I mean, Russia today just speaks to that. I mean, that is what it is. It's essentially trying to put out a sort of Kremlin worldview for Western viewers. TikTok as well, just the way the algorithm works. I think even the greatest defender of TikTok would say there's some level of, Chinese Communist Party stuff going on there. And it's just very clear that they do actually want to sort of influence the way issues are discussed in the West, certainly. To what degree you think that they are successful or not, again, it's a sort of a matter of opinion. And I think we're certainly in an age where there are people who are being paid by the Kremlin to regurgitate Kremlin propaganda word for word. Although, having said that, one of the things that's really difficult is, and I say this as someone who pays a lot of attention to this, I think trying to ascertain who are the genuine shills, as in who are actually being financially recompensed by the Russian government to spew talking points, or who are just the useful idiots who are doing it for free. I think there's just actually no way to know. There's absolutely no way to know. And I think the only way we'll ever know is if, the Putin regime falls and there's some sort of secret files that get released. And actually then we'll probably be like, that guy did it for free? I was sure he was one of them. And then there'll be somebody who will have been secretly being paid by the Kremlin for years and years that we will never have suspected ever once. It's not me, I promise. But anyhow, there is one thing I think that we know to say about what's going on now. I think coming on to Trump's the tariffs, Trump's economic policy, and how that relates to the topic that we're talking about in terms of will we see ourselves as a world at war? I mean, essentially, Trump has declared economic war on most of the world. Interestingly, not Russia and North Korea. I mean, one could make the argument that they don't export anything to America, so what would be the point? Except it is a little bit odd that they're left out when there are islands full of penguins who are being tariffed to death. So anyway, just really odd. And also worth pointing out, as I have done on this podcast before, but it doesn't really make any sense from a right-wing economic perspective to pursue the tariff agenda that Trump is doing. I mean, if you look, Elon Musk loves to put Milton Friedman quotes and clips up on his social media site. Well, great, except that Friedman would have been dead set against the tariff idea. He would have passionately hated the whole thing. So they are really antithetical to anything Friedman ever talked about. So that's what's really strange. It's this sort of self-declared bunch of right-wingers putting in place economic policies that, I mean, for the most part would have made Brezhnev blush. I mean, like, really, not blush, or brush or blush. Would have made Brezhnev, upset, or, mildly confused or upset. Sorry, I shouldn't have tried alliteration there. But seriously, they couldn't have gone against the neoliberal orthodoxy any harder than the Trump administration has with these tariffs. Except, I guess they considered neoliberal to be left-wing now, which is kind of, I'm just going to say it, obnoxiously stupid. I mean, if neoliberalism is left-wing, what is right-wing then? Protectionism, apparently. Or fighting for the collective rights and wages of the common worker. I guess that's right-wing now. Having the government control loads of aspects of your life, including what you can buy and from where. I guess that's right-wing now, too. I mean, that just seems kind of idiotic to me. But maybe that's just me being judgmental. I don't know. Leave a comment below if you... tell me what you think. I don't get it. So try and explain it to me. And by the time this comes out, it's possible that actually maybe the whole thing, maybe he'll have stopped the tariffs. I mean, by the time I've edited this and put it onto YouTube, maybe all the tariffs will have been reversed, and everybody who said that they were great will be trying to explain their way out of how they didn't really mean it. And, it was never, Trump just meant it as a bluff or something. Although, actually now, given the movement on the markets, I mean, the Dow Jones has crashed quite badly. We'll see how it goes over the next couple of days. That could be even worse by the time this comes out. But at the time of recording, certainly there's been some damage done that I think will be difficult for the Trump apologists to get round. So now I'm going to move on to most people who watch this regularly and read my Substack, their favorite topic, which is Brexit. But it is relevant, actually, to all of this and to both whether World War III has started and, indeed, Trump's tariffs. Hilariously, British Brexiters are claiming that the fact that Britain is only getting walloped 10% on tariffs instead of the 20% that's going to apply to European Union countries. For now, I need to stress, I mean, as I say, that might not even be the case by the time this video comes out. So crazy is everything that's going on. But for the time being, that's what's happened. Britain gets 10%, so gets an easy ride. So Brexiters are asserting that this alone proves that Brexit was a great idea. Just to argue, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, they are correct that this is the most tangible Brexit benefit that we have had so far in 5 years of Brexit. I mean, in so much as that all the rest of them are completely made-up rubbish. I think we can go back to the trade deals with Indiana and North Carolina, or all the guff that was talked about joining CPTPP, that was going to net the British economy trillions of pounds a year and all that stuff, or even the sovereignty argument, which is just basically Brexit is good because it's Brexit. Brexit means Brexit, basically reduced to a ideology. But no, I'll give him this one at least on the level of 10% tariffs are better than 20%. I mean, that's kind of the maths of that are inarguable. But having established that, in the end, the losses at the other end for all of this involved in Brexit are far greater. And in fact, what's going on with Trump really, I think, sort of argues against Brexit much more than the 10% thing that argues for it. People have to remember that the dream of the Brexiters was that we were entering a new era of free trade, right? That was the whole idea. Global Britain, if some of you will remember back to 2016, that somehow the Five Eyes, America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a freed from the EU Britain, would form an Anglosphere trading alliance. And that would be a rival for anyone, which it would be, by the way, and will make it difficult. It will rival the EU, and Britain will get a much better deal because it will have all this access to all these flourishing Anglosphere economies, including, of course, the big prize being America. And it will prove that Brexit was the right thing all along. Now, there are anti-Brexiters who will be watching this who will think that the idea of the Anglosphere, the Five Eyes as a trading entity, was a horrible idea and go on about chlorinated chicken and all that. I take a different view. Actually, I think that the Five Eyes as a trading entity, trading setup, a new trading bloc, would have been a great thing. I think it would have been amazing. My contention was always that it was never going to happen, that there was essentially a 0% chance that it would ever happen. And I would now say with what Trump is doing, it really is a 0% chance. It isn't just that Trump has ruled out the possibility of that, for the length of his presidency. I think he's sort of torched it for good, because I just don't see how any of those countries, particularly Canada, will ever trust the U.S. again on the same level after what Trump has done. That will always be there as something that's happened. The trauma of that will exist, and the idea that somehow in the future, maybe way in the future, if you're talking about like a generation from now, obviously anything's possible. It'll be a totally different world. Who knows? But certainly within our lifetimes, certainly within my lifetime, no, I just don't see it happening. And so if there isn't going to be that, and there isn't going to be a free trade deal between the US and the UK, which, by the way, the Brexiters are still talking up, which is astounding, really, given what Trump is actually doing, it's just amazing. So, here we are, the Brexiters jumping up and down about only getting hammered by 10%, which is, a bit like, someone shooting you in the arm, and you only lose partial movement in your arm, and saying that it's for the. I guess it's better than losing the arm or dying. But at the end of the day, I think talking it up as some wonderful thing it's a bit rich. It's a fairly lousy benefit to Brexit when you really get down to it, isn't it? It really doesn't really have a lot to do with the whole sovereignty, taking back control thing. What did we do? We got lucky, really, that for whatever weird reason, the Trump and the children around him who are doing this stuff using ChatGPT thought, oh, well, let's just not hammer Britain quite as badly this week. Also worth pointing out things like Iceland, right? Who, let's point out, aren't in the EU, but are in the European single market, right? They have an EEA deal, which means they're not a member of the EU, but they follow certain rules in order to be inside the single market. They are being tariffed at 10%, at least, time of recording. This is probably a fluid situation. They are being tariffed at 10% by the Americans. So that tells you that actually we could have had a soft Brexit and got this. We could have left the European Union, had some sort of EEA-like deal, and been in a single market and only got a 10% tariff. So actually, it doesn't really argue for hard Brexit, at least at the very, very least. What to add here about Brexit? Brexit sucks, really. And I want to point out here, I would just like to say for anyone watching this, some will say something like, well, I'm just religiously devoted to being anti-Brexit, and, this is my big thing, and I'm obsessed, and why can't I just let it go, and what's the big deal? Brexit's happened, everybody's moved on, what's the problem? I think it's worth pointing out that in most of my life, in terms of my day job and things that I do, I work around Brexiteers. I mean, that's what I do. And by the way, I love them, and I love the people that I work with. And they're not only Brexiteers; some of them are sort of very heavily involved in how and why Brexit happened. But I also think they're brilliant, the best people I've ever worked with. Most of my friends are Brexiteers, and a huge number of the people I work with in my sort of life as a journalist and I speak to, particularly when I'm on the road, are people who, believe in Brexit and, think Brexit was a great thing still. And and also, meanwhile, most of the Remainers I know, at least, I don't mean just like, I don't know, people who are fathers at my school or something who happen to believe that Brexit was a bad idea or whatever, or business people. I mean like the hardcore Remainer, posse, the people in Westminster who still care about this stuff. I'm just going to be honest and say I don't like most of them that very much. I don't really get along with a lot of them. I think most of them are. I'm not going to name anyone by name, obviously. I want to be clear. So if you're listening to this and you think I'm referring to you, no, you're one of the nice ones. But seriously, I mean, a lot of them are horrible snobs, and they look down on anyone who wasn't privately educated, and they have this annoying surety that they are on the right side of history and all their political enemies are wrong. And they do this despite having, constantly losing over and over and over and over again, and actually being in a position where, bizarrely, more than half the country thinks Brexit was a bad idea, and yet that has no political traction whatsoever within Westminster. So they're just constantly losing what should be a winning battle. But, they just can't learn from their mistakes. I just don't see how hard it would. You just think at some point they would get together in a room and go, you know what? Maybe this whole talking down to most of Britain, calling them uneducated morons, etc. Maybe that isn't working out for us. And while we're here, maybe we should accept that around, I don't know, maybe 50% of the country at any given time is going to be technically right of center, and maybe we should figure out that if we want to reverse Brexit or rejoin the EU, maybe what we need to do is we might want to construct some arguments that like appeal to those people instead of always just talking to people who are exactly like us. And no, they never do this. They seem medically incapable of doing this. They just keep going on about progressive majority and it's actually really the voting system that's keeping us down. And if we just had proportional representation, we'd have eternal left-wing governments in Britain. And this despite the fact that this just completely sidesteps the concrete fact that most European countries have some sort of PR system, voting system in place, and yet have right-wing governments all the time. So I'm just going to say, if I could join my colleagues and friends in accepting Brexit as a done deal, and maybe even thinking, do you know what? Actually, maybe there is something good about Brexit. Maybe Brexit was the right move. Maybe it was a good thing. That would make my life immediately easier and smoother in every possible sense. I mean, and so why don't I do that? Because I just can't do that. Because the arguments for Brexit continue to be so bad. Like we only got hammered 10% on tariffs, and I'm supposed to suddenly change my mind on Brexit and go, you've done it. And they don't realize how terrible an argument that is, how it's really, really rubbish. It's really bad. It's a bad argument. Some insane man who runs the United States of America has decided that for today, we won't get as badly hammered, and still get hammered, by the way, on tariffs. And that means we should have left the largest trading bloc on the entire planet. No, like I say, I wish there was a real, at least even a semi-decent argument for why Brexit was a good idea. I keep hoping to hear one, and I never do. All the arguments I've ever heard for Brexit are really bad. Most of them are almost entirely spurious, such as the fake trade deals with North Carolina, which is, I still am sort of shocked by the stupidity of. And so, I'm stuck where I am. I'm basically stuck on the anti-Brexit side with a bunch of people I don't really like and don't like me, working around a bunch of people who are pro-Brexit, whom I love and think are great and respect highly. But I just disagree with them on this completely and utterly. So yeah, that's that. And I wanted to end on something uplifting here, some sort of artist or something wonderful. But given that we just talked about World War III and Brexit and how depressing the whole Brexit debate is, and the fact that Britain's being hammered by 10% tariffs by America, and yet there are people on the right in Britain who are actually having the temerity to celebrate that fact. I don't have the energy to say anything uplifting. I'm really sorry. I don't have a positive message to tell you other than if we are in World War III, at least according to historians 100 years hence, I'm sorry that that's had to happen, and that's a bad thing. And I hope we all get out of it. And really, most of it's cyber warfare and not bombs falling on cities in Europe. I mean, we can only hope. Although, actually, no, I know I've just said I wanted to try and say something uplifting, but one of the things on the World War III thing that I actually didn't get to is I'm genuinely worried that Putin is going to be placed in a position where, I mean, saying he's forced to, it's stupid. It's like I'm going along with the people saying it's NATO's fault for Ukrainian invasion. But, I mean, just given his overall situation, he's going to be in a situation where it's going to be in his best interest to invade, Lithuania, one of the Baltics. Probably not Poland right away. That would be a bit much, but he might even do that because he's going to have to take advantage of the situation we're in America with Trump. I mean, it's really possible that Trump, gets pushed aside or who knows what, or or changes his mind because he's completely erratic. And so, I mean, when has NATO been weaker than it is right at this second? Can Putin, ignore that? I mean, I hope he does, or that actually Russia just can't possibly do it logistically and we'll be fine. But, I do constantly think, is Putin going to do something like that? Is he going to test NATO's resolve and actually call the bluff? Because if Russian tanks roll into Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia or Poland and America does nothing, then that is, for all intents and purposes, NATO is finished. It's over because it's been tested and it didn't work. And Putin has called, certainly America's bluff, maybe the West's bluff. What will we do? Will we send troops? I mean, I don't know. And actually, I don't even think this is really being discussed because we're still living in this world where that's just completely impossible and Putin would never do that. But then that's what we said about him invading Ukraine. So anyway, on that note, I will end things on that cheery note. Just to stress, all the views and opinions I have voiced here over the last, since I started, are not necessarily the views of Bloomsbury Radio and the Bloomsbury Institute, who, as always, I thank for hosting this hopefully informative video. If you haven't already and you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad. My producer is Barra Fitzgibbon. I just completely screwed up your name. Sorry. It's Barra. He's great. And I will see you all next time. Thank you very much.